I was scrolling through my messages late one evening, half distracted, half bored, when I saw a new message request from someone I did not recognize. The profile photo was unfamiliar, just a simple picture of a woman sitting on a park bench, smiling gently at the camera. The name meant nothing to me, but the message, just a few short sentences, made my heart stop. Hi, I know this might sound strange, but I think I am your sister. I have been searching for you for a long time. Please read this. I read it twice, then 3 times. My fingers froze above the screen. I could feel the rhythm of my breathing shift, shallower, faster. My mind raced with disbelief. I had no sister. At least, I had never been told I did. Raised as an only child, I had never imagined this possibility. Was this a mistake? A scam? Some cruel stranger playing with emotions they could not possibly understand? And yet, something about the tone felt sincere. Something about her eyes in that profile photo felt familiar. I stared at the message, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this some kind of cruel joke? Or was my entire life about to change? I grew up believing I was an only child. Our small house was quiet, tucked away in a sleepy neighborhood where the sound of a passing car felt like an event. My mother raised me on her own. She was not cold, but there was always a certain distance between us, as if she had built invisible walls around parts of her heart that I could never access. She worked long hours, often coming home tired, her face lined with stress that never quite faded, even when she smiled. There were photographs in the house, but not many. Most were of me, birthdays, school events, random days in the park. A few featured my mother as a young woman, but they always felt strangely disconnected from our life together, like echoes from a time she refused to talk about. I used to ask her about the man who was supposed to be my father. She would pause, then say something vague. He was not ready to be a father, or it is complicated. No name, no details, just a shadow that haunted our family in silence. Eventually, I stopped asking. The answers never came. School was a mix of ordinary and lonely. I had friends, but I often envied those who had siblings. Watching them bicker one moment and laugh the next made something ache inside me. I would imagine what it must feel like to have someone close in age, someone who understood the odd little habits of your family without needing explanation. In the quiet moments before sleep, I would sometimes dream up a brother or sister. It was never a specific face or name, just the feeling of not being alone in the world. My mother never mentioned siblings. Not hers, not mine. When I was younger, I once asked if she had any brothers or sisters. She simply said no, and that was the end of it. I remember watching her face closely that day. Her answer came too quickly, too neatly. There was something she was hiding, but I had no way of knowing what it was. It was like standing in front of a locked door, unable to find the key. I suppose there were signs I chose not to see. A couple of times, I overheard her on the phone with someone, speaking in a hushed, tense voice. She would lower her tone and leave the room, and when she returned, she would pretend the call had been nothing important. There were also boxes in the attic, sealed tight, labeled only with years that meant nothing to me. I was told not to go through them, and I never did. Some part of me understood even then that there were stories in those boxes that she had no intention of sharing. My birthdays were quiet affairs. No big family gatherings, no visits from distant relatives. It was always just me and my mother, sometimes a neighbor or a friend from school. I remember thinking that was normal. It was only when I got older and visited other people's homes that I began to realize how small my world really was. There was a persistent emptiness I could never quite explain. I did not feel unloved, but I often felt incomplete, as if something fundamental had been misplaced in the early years of my life. I blamed it on many things: the absence of a father, the lack of extended family, the fact that my mother kept so much of herself hidden. But I never imagined that emptiness might have a name. I never thought it could take the shape of another human being. I went through most of my life adapting to that quiet ache, treating it as something that simply came with being me. I did well in school, got a decent job, lived in a modest apartment, and told myself this was enough. That I did not need answers to the questions I had long ago buried. But every now and then, when someone would ask if I had any siblings, a strange feeling would rise in my chest. I would answer no, and yet it always felt like a lie I had been taught to believe. Looking back, I wonder how I managed to convince myself that the silences in my family were normal. That it was okay not to know where you came from. That secrets could be a foundation on which to build a life. I suppose when you grow up in that kind of environment, it becomes your version of truth. You stop questioning, because questioning only leads to more silence. The message that arrived that night shattered all of that. With just a few words, it opened a door I did not even know existed. It forced me to confront the possibility that everything I believed about my life had been shaped by absence, by someone missing who should have been there. And though I did not know it yet, that absence had a face, a voice, and a story that was about to collide with mine. I must have stared at that message 100 times before I found the courage to open it completely. The preview alone had already shaken me to my core, but reading the full message brought with it a new wave of disbelief, one that hit somewhere deeper than logic could reach. Hi. I hope this does not scare you. My name is Lena. I have been searching for you for a very long time. I believe we are siblings. I was told I had a younger brother named Aaron. I think that might be you. If I am wrong, I truly apologize. But if I am right, I would love to talk. It felt like my mind detached from my body. My hands trembled slightly, the screen blurry as I blinked against the sudden sting in my eyes. I did not know what to think. A part of me wanted to laugh it off, label it as a mistake or some kind of odd coincidence. But another part, quiet, alert, almost childlike, held its breath, waiting for the truth to step into the light. I had never seen the name Lena before in any family records, nor had I ever heard my mother mention it. I clicked on her profile. The photo showed her sitting under a tree, sunlight filtering through the leaves behind her. She looked to be in her late 20s or early 30s, a few years older than me. Her smile was soft, cautious. I scrolled through her pictures, my heart thudding in a rhythm I could not control. There were a few selfies, a photo with an older woman I assumed was her mother, and another taken near a beach. But it was one specific photo that made me stop. It was an old image, grainy, clearly scanned from a physical print. In it, a young girl held the hand of a toddler boy with a mop of dark hair. The caption read, Aaron and me. A lifetime ago. My breath caught. That could not be me, could it? The boy did look familiar, in the way an old mirror might reflect something half forgotten. I could not remember ever taking a picture like that, or being with a girl like her. But the name in the caption, the way she looked at the camera as if she had loved that moment, it made something in my chest stir, something I had not felt since childhood. I spent the next hour scrolling, zooming in, reading every comment, every tag. I looked for mutual friends. There were none. No shared connections, no common pages, nothing to verify what she was saying. But her timeline was full of mentions about searching, closure, and finally finding him. I read a post from 2 months earlier that said, I will never stop looking for you. Wherever you are, I hope you are okay. I still remember your laugh. I did not know what to do with that. Part of me wanted to respond immediately. Another part feared what would come next if I did. What if this unraveled my entire life? What if this person was telling the truth? And worse, what if everyone in my life had known and simply chosen never to tell me? I could not sleep that night. I kept hearing her voice in my head, though I had never heard it before. I imagined what it would sound like. I imagined us as children, playing in a backyard I had never seen, building memories I could not recall. I imagined her watching me grow up from afar, wondering if I even remembered her. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in my hand. My mother entered the room, still in her robe, rubbing sleep from her eyes. I watched her for a moment, wondering how many secrets she had buried behind that familiar face. I had never confronted her like this before. But something inside me had shifted. The silence I had once accepted no longer felt tolerable. I asked her about Lena. Her reaction was immediate and startling. Her face paled, her hands froze mid-motion, and for a brief second, I saw pure panic flash across her features. She set her coffee down without drinking it. Her voice was a whisper. Where did you hear that name? I told her about the message. I told her about the photo. I told her that I needed the truth. No more silence, no more evasion. I needed to know who Lena was. And who I was. She sat down slowly, as if her body had suddenly aged 10 years. Her eyes welled up, and when she finally spoke, her voice trembled with a pain I had never seen in her before. You were so little, she said. You do not remember. But yes, Lena is your sister. The words hit me like a wave. A sister. Not a metaphor, not a close friend or a distant cousin. A real sister. My sister. My mother explained everything, her hands clenched tightly in her lap as she spoke. She had been young when she had Lena, barely out of school. The relationship with Lena's father had been turbulent and unhealthy. After years of trying to make it work, she left him, taking Lena with her. But life was hard, and when she met my father years later, she thought she had found a second chance. They married, and I was born. But my father had not wanted to raise another man's child. My mother had been forced into a choice no parent should ever have to make. She placed Lena in the care of her own sister, my aunt, who lived several states away. Promises were made that it would be temporary, that she would stay involved, that they would figure it out. But time passed, and the distance grew. Shame and guilt took over. My father insisted on moving forward without reminders of the past. And Lena was never brought back. My mother cried as she told me. She said she thought it was better for me not to know, that it would only confuse things. She said she hated herself for what happened. That she had never stopped thinking about Lena, but she had been too afraid to reach out after all those years. I sat there, stunned. I had imagined many possibilities, but nothing as devastating as this. A sister, living a separate life, thinking she had been abandoned. And me, growing up with no idea that I had ever been part of something more. It was hard to speak. Hard to even move. I felt like my entire identity had been rewritten in a single conversation. But under the shock and the grief, there was something else too, a flicker of hope. Because she had found me. Despite everything, Lena had never stopped searching. And now that I knew, I could begin to understand the truth of who I really was. I picked up my phone and opened the message again. This time, I typed a reply. Hi Lena. I think we need to talk. The hours after I sent the message to Lena passed slowly, each minute dragging behind the next like a heavy weight. I had simply written, Hi Lena. I think we need to talk, and she responded within moments. Her reply was short but full of emotion. I have waited so long to hear from you. Thank you. I am here whenever you are ready. We agreed on a video call for the next evening. I spent that entire day walking around in a daze, unsure of what to expect, unsure of what to feel. I was about to meet a sister I had no memory of, a person whose blood ran alongside mine, whose childhood should have been interwoven with mine, but instead ran parallel, unknown and untouched. When the time came, I sat in my bedroom with the door shut, the curtains drawn to soften the light. My laptop screen was open, the call window waiting. I could feel my heart racing, my palms damp against my knees. Then the call connected, and there she was. Lena. She looked just like her photos, but something about seeing her live, moving, blinking, smiling, made everything feel real. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me, and she let out a soft breath, like she had been holding it in for years. I cannot believe it, she whispered. Neither could I. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. We just stared, both searching for familiarity in each other's faces. It was there, undeniably. In the curve of the jaw, the shape of the nose, even the way we tilted our heads when we were uncertain. She was the first to speak. You look exactly like our mother when she was younger, she said, smiling through tears. I laughed softly. You do too. It broke the tension. We both laughed, awkward but sincere. And then the conversation began. We talked for hours. She told me about her childhood, about being raised by our aunt, our mother's sister. She said our aunt had been kind but distant, more concerned with rules than affection. For a long time, Lena had believed our mother would return for her, but as the years passed and the visits stopped, that hope faded. She said she used to wait at the window on her birthday, imagining our mother walking up the path with a cake or a present, something to prove she had not been forgotten. I listened with a heavy heart. My own childhood had been lonely in its own way, but it paled in comparison to the loss Lena had endured. She had known who she was missing. I had not even known there was someone to miss. I told her about our mother, about the small house we had shared, the quiet routines, the silence that filled the spaces where stories should have lived. I described the birthdays that had felt incomplete, the questions that had gone unanswered. The more we talked, the more it became clear how much we had both lost. Not just time, but memories. Shared experiences. Sibling rituals like fighting over the remote, whispering secrets in the dark, covering for each other when we broke something at home. We would never get those years back. That realization sat between us like a stone. Lena wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. I used to imagine what you would be like, she said quietly. I always hoped you would be kind. That you would not hate me for showing up like this. I could never hate you, I said. You did nothing wrong. You were taken from me before I even knew you existed. There was pain in her eyes, but also relief. We were finally sharing a truth that had been denied to us for far too long. We talked about everything. School, friends, our favorite books, the kind of music we liked. There were differences, of course. She was more outgoing, I was quieter. She had lived in 3 different states by the time she was 18, while I had barely moved from the town I was born in. But then there were the odd little similarities that kept surfacing. We both added cinnamon to our hot chocolate. We both rubbed the bridge of our nose when we were thinking hard. We both hated the sound of styrofoam rubbing together. And then there were our laughs. The exact same laugh. At one point during the call, she showed me a photo album she had kept since she was a teenager. It was filled with pictures of her childhood, but near the back were a few faded photos of us together. I had never seen them before. In one, I was a baby asleep in her arms. In another, she was reading to me on the floor beside a bookshelf. I kept these hidden, she said. I was afraid that if I looked at them too often, it would hurt too much. Seeing those photos made something break open inside me. I had always felt the absence of something I could not name. And now here it was, staring back at me with wide, innocent eyes. I showed her the few photos I had of my childhood. She recognized our mother instantly, her face softening with memories that clearly ran deep. She used to sing to us, Lena said. A lullaby about the moon and the sea. I still remember it. She never sang it to me, I said quietly. Lena nodded, a sadness crossing her face. She was not the same after she left me. I think she tried to forget, but she never really did. The conversation wound down after almost 3 hours. We were both emotionally drained, but neither of us wanted to be the one to say goodbye. Eventually, we promised to call again soon. As I closed my laptop, I sat in the stillness of my room and tried to absorb what had just happened. A sister. My sister. Lena. There was still so much to learn, so many emotions to process. Anger simmered beneath the surface, for the years we had lost, for the lies we had been told, for the moments that had slipped by while we lived our separate lives. But there was something else, too. A beginning. Because in spite of everything, we had found each other. And maybe, just maybe, that was the one part of our story we would get to write together. The days following my first real conversation with Lena felt like living in 2 realities at once. In one, I was still the same person who had woken up every morning, brushed my teeth in the same mirror, passed the same photos on the hallway wall. But in the other, I was someone entirely different. Someone with a sister, with a history I had never been told, with a family tree that had quietly grown extra branches behind my back. It was no longer possible to keep the knowledge locked inside. I needed to speak with my mother again. I needed answers. More than the vague justifications and tearful confessions she had offered that night at the kitchen table. I needed the whole truth, even if it broke me. When I confronted her again, she seemed smaller, as if the weight of her past had begun to crush her from within. She sat down heavily on the couch, hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes refusing to meet mine. I asked her, calmly but firmly, to explain everything. Not just the parts she thought I could handle. All of it. She sighed, long and tired, then looked up at me. You deserve to know. And I am sorry I waited this long. She told me that she had gotten pregnant with Lena when she was only 19. Her relationship with Lena's father had started with hope and ended in chaos. He had been unfaithful, controlling, and eventually, violent. She had taken Lena and fled, moving back in with her sister, the same woman who would later become Lena's legal guardian. When she met my father, she had already been through years of instability. He offered something she had not had in a long time: safety, consistency, a calm routine. But there had been a condition. He did not want to raise another man's child. My mother, exhausted and frightened of losing another chance at a stable life, made the decision to leave Lena permanently with her sister. She never told my father about the brief visits she continued to make. She never mentioned the late-night crying fits, the birthdays she never celebrated. Eventually, the visits stopped. My father suspected something, but he never asked. When I was born, all her focus turned to me. I thought I was doing the right thing, she said quietly. I thought giving you a peaceful life meant letting go of everything that came before. But I was wrong. I buried too much. I hurt both of you. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that no life built on lies could ever truly be peaceful. I wanted to demand why she did not fight harder for Lena, why she chose silence instead of truth. But I also saw the pain in her eyes, the years of guilt etched into the lines on her face. She had punished herself in quiet ways, and yet, the damage had still spilled onto me and Lena like ink from a shattered bottle. When I brought up the idea of reuniting the family, even just a conversation between her and Lena, my mother froze. She will not want to see me, she said. Not after everything. I would not blame her. I told her that she owed Lena that choice, not to decide for her this time, not again. Word of our reunion spread slowly through the rest of the family. My father, when he heard, was stunned into silence. When he finally spoke, it was not anger I heard in his voice, but confusion. I did not know, he kept repeating. She never told me. I never would have. Then he stopped himself. He had, after all, made it very clear what he wanted all those years ago. He had drawn the line, and my mother had crossed it with a sacrifice she would never fully recover from. Aunts and uncles started reaching out, some with support, some with cautious questions. A few admitted they had known something. Whispers at family gatherings years ago, conversations abruptly ended when I entered the room. Nobody had told me the truth, not because they wanted to hurt me, but because the silence had become more comfortable than the confession. The full picture began to take shape. Lena had not been given away in a formal sense. There had never been adoption papers. My aunt had raised her with the understanding that it was for the best, that it would be temporary, until it simply was not. There had been fights between the sisters, bitter arguments behind closed doors. And eventually, Lena had become a ghost in our family, someone not spoken of, someone lost. It was overwhelming. I found myself caught in the middle of a storm I had never seen coming. Every memory I held up to the light now seemed fragile, conditional. Every moment from my childhood, holidays, birthdays, even the quiet nights on the couch, now had a shadow behind it. The shadow of what was missing. I began to question everything. Who was I really? The only child who had grown up in that small, quiet home? Or the younger brother of a girl who had never stopped looking for me? Was I the product of a stable upbringing or the result of decisions steeped in fear and sacrifice? The identity I had carried for so long started to splinter. I did not know how to reconcile the boy I had been with the man I was becoming, someone shaped not just by presence but by absence. Someone who now saw family not as a fixed truth, but as a complicated, shifting story full of edits, omissions, and redemptions. There were days when I felt furious, at my mother, at my father, at the whole silent circle of adults who had allowed this to happen. There were nights when I cried for the boy I had been and the sister I had lost. But in the quietest moments, I also felt something else rising to the surface. Gratitude. Because in spite of all the lies and silence, Lena had found me. And she had not come with blame or bitterness. She had come with open hands and a full heart. She had offered me not just answers, but connection. And that, more than anything, was what I had always longed for. We began to speak every few days. Sometimes our conversations were light, full of music, shows we both liked, silly memories of childhood. Other times they were heavy, filled with shared grief, questions without easy answers, the ache of what we could never get back. Through it all, our bond grew stronger. Eventually, my mother agreed to a phone call with Lena. I do not know what they said, they asked for privacy, but I know they cried. I know Lena did not hang up in anger. And I know my mother slept more peacefully that night than she had in years. I was still healing, still learning what it meant to carry two truths inside me. But I no longer felt alone in that journey. I had a sister now. A real one. And together, we were beginning to stitch together something new from the fragments of what had been lost. Lena came to visit for the first time in early spring. The trees outside were just beginning to blossom, and the air carried that familiar scent of new beginnings. I waited for her at the train station, pacing in small circles, my heart beating with an odd combination of excitement and nerves. When she stepped off the platform, suitcase in hand and eyes scanning the crowd, I saw her before she saw me. And when she did, her whole face lit up. There was no hesitation. We walked straight into each other's arms, a quiet kind of reunion. It was the second time we had met in person, but it felt like the 100th. There was something easy now, something warm and familiar that had grown between us in the months since that first video call. We had spoken almost every day since then, shared so many pieces of our lives that it no longer felt like we were strangers trying to fill a lifetime of silence. We were siblings now. Truly. That weekend was filled with small, beautiful moments. We made coffee together in the mornings, shared childhood photos, and stayed up too late watching movies we both loved. We laughed at how similar our tastes were in snacks, how we both talked to ourselves when we cooked. We had inside jokes now, ones that made sense only to us, born from shared memories and quirks we were just beginning to discover. She met my friends, who welcomed her without question. They were curious, of course, but kind. They could see how happy I was to have her here. They saw the way we looked at each other. Two people trying to make up for lost time, two halves of a story finally reunited. On the last night of her visit, we sat outside on the back steps, wrapped in blankets and watching the stars. She leaned her head on my shoulder and sighed. I used to look at the sky and wonder if you were out there somewhere, she said softly. Now you are sitting right next to me. I did not know what to say. The moment was too big for words. So I just held her hand, and we stayed there like that. Two siblings, finally found. After that, our visits became more frequent. I spent a week at her place that summer, and we explored her neighborhood, visited her favorite bakery, and walked the streets she used to roam alone. She introduced me to her closest friends, who had become like family to her. We even visited the home where she had grown up, the small, creaky house that had seen her tears and dreams and loneliness. I stood in her old room, surrounded by echoes of a childhood I had not shared, and felt something settle inside me. She was no longer alone in those memories. Now I was there, too. Our birthdays, once quiet and solitary, became shared celebrations. That first year, we threw a party together, a backyard gathering with music, cake, and a long table filled with people who loved us. It felt like a second chance, a new tradition blooming from the ashes of what we had missed. My mother came to the party, too. Her relationship with Lena was still delicate, still marked by years of pain and distance. But they were trying. They spoke occasionally now, usually by phone. There were still tears, still silences, but there was also effort, and that was more than I had expected in the beginning. My mother had begun her own healing, slowly and with care. She had even started seeing a counselor. I saw the change in her, a softness, a readiness to be more honest, more open. She knew she could not erase the past, but she was learning to face it. As for me, I was no longer the person who had once believed he was an only child. That version of me still lived in the corners of my memory, but he no longer defined who I was. I had grown. I had expanded. My world, once small and tightly held together by silence, was now wide and full of possibility. I began writing again, something I had not done since college. I wrote about family, about hidden truths, about the way love can stretch across years of separation. I wrote about the moment I read Lena's message and how everything changed. Some of it I shared with her. Some of it I kept for myself. People often ask me how it felt, to suddenly discover a sibling, to uncover such a massive secret. I never had a simple answer. It was overwhelming. It was painful. It was beautiful. It was all of it, all at once. Like finding a piece of yourself you did not know was missing and realizing you had been walking crooked your whole life because of it. I learned to forgive, not just the people who had lied or hidden things but myself too. For not asking more questions, for not seeing what was right beneath the surface. I learned that healing is not a destination but a process, and that family is not about perfect beginnings but about showing up, again and again, even after the silence. Lena and I started a small tradition. Every year, on the anniversary of the message she sent me, we meet, no matter where we are. We spend that day together. We look through old photos. We add new ones. We talk about where we have been and where we are going. And every time, before the day ends, she says the same thing. I almost gave up. I am so glad I did not. So am I. Because that one message, sent on a quiet night, in a moment of hope and fear, changed everything. It broke through years of silence, unraveled lies, and brought light into the darkest corners of our histories. It reminded me that sometimes, the truth does find its way, no matter how deeply it is buried. Technology gets blamed for a lot. Disconnection, noise, distraction. But in our case, it was the thread that pulled us back together. It was the bridge across decades of separation. It was the miracle that reminded us both that love, even when forgotten, still lingers in the background, waiting to be remembered. Now, when I look at my life, I do not just see the scars of what was hidden. I see the strength that grew in its place. I see the laughter of my sister across the room, the text messages filled with inside jokes, the birthdays that now feel complete. I see a future built on truth, not illusion. And I carry it forward, not as a burden, but as a gift. For years, I thought I was alone. But one message changed everything, and reminded me that family finds a way, even across time and silence.